A man is in his boat out on the lake with a bucket full of fish that he had just caught. A wildlife officer spots him and pulls his boat up alongside. Seeing the bucket of fish in the man's boat, the wildlife officer asks to see his fishing license. The man tells the officer that he doesn't need a fishing license. The wildlife officer looks down at the bucket and says, "You definitely need a license to be catching fish. I can see that you've been fishing today. You have live fish right there." The man says, "Oh no, those are my pet fish. I just brought them out here for the day to enjoy the lake." "Pet fish?" replied the wildlife officer. "Oh, absolutely. I let them out of the bucket and they swim around and play, but when I whistle, they all jump right back in. They are very well trained." The wildlife officer scratches his chin, then says, "I've never heard such a... Well, I've got to see this." The man dumps the bucket of fish into the lake, then calmly turns and looks at the wildlife officer. The wildlife officer says, "Well, call them back." The man says, "Call who back?" The wildlife officer says, "Your pet fish." "What fish?" replied the man. A police officer pulls over a speeding car. The officer says, "I clocked you at 120 kilometers per h, sir." The driver says, "Christ, officer, I had it on cruise control at 100. Perhaps your radar gun needs calibrating." Not looking up from her knitting, the wife says, "Now don't be silly, dear. You know that this car doesn't have cruise control." As the officer writes out the ticket, the driver looks over at his wife and growls, "Can't you please keep your mouth shut for once?" The wife smiles demurely and says, "You should be thankful your radar detector went off when it did." As the officer makes out the second ticket for the illegal radar detector unit, the man glowers at his wife and says through clenched teeth, "Oh, woman, can't you keep your mouth shut?" The officer frowns and says, "And I notice that you're not wearing your seat belt, sir. That's an automatic $75 fine." The driver says, "Yeah, well, you see, officer, I had it on but took it off when you pulled me over so that I could get my license out of my back pocket." The wife says, "Now, dear, you know very well that you didn't have your seat belt on. You never wear your seat belt when you're driving." And as the police officer is writing out the third ticket, the driver turns to his wife and barks, "Why don't you shut the fuck up?" The officer looks over at the woman and asks, "Does your husband always talk to you this way, ma'am?" The wife replies, "Only when he's drunk." A mature lady gets pulled over for speeding. Older woman, "Is there a problem, officer?" Officer, "Ma'am, you were speeding in a..." Older woman, "Oh, I see." Officer, "Can I see your license, please?" Older woman, "I'd give it to you, but I don't have one." Officer, "You don't have one?" Older woman, "Lost it 4 years ago for drunk driving." Officer, "I see. Can I see your vehicle registration papers, please?" Older woman, "I can't do that." Officer, "Why not?" Older woman, "I stole this car." Officer, "Stole it?" Older woman, "Yes, and I killed and hacked up the owner." Officer, "You what?" Older woman, "His body parts are in plastic bags in the trunk if you want to see." The officer looks at the woman and slowly backs away to his car and calls for backup. Within minutes, 5 police cars circle her vehicle. A senior officer slowly approaches her car, clasping his half-drawn gun. Officer 2, "Ma'am, could you step out of your vehicle, please?" The woman steps out of her vehicle. Older woman, "Is there a problem, sir?" Officer 2, "One of my officers told me this is a stolen vehicle and you murdered the owner." Older woman, "Murdered the owner?" Officer 2, "Yes. Could you please open the trunk of your car, please?" The woman opens the trunk, revealing nothing but an empty trunk. Officer 2, "Is this your car, ma'am?" Older woman, "Yes, here are the registration papers, and here is my license." The officer examines the license. He looks quite puzzled. Officer 2, "Thank you, ma'am. One of my officers told me you didn't have a license, that you stole this car, and that you murdered and hacked up the owner." Older woman, "Bet the liar told you I was speeding too." So these two ladies walk into a mortician's office. The first woman says to the mortician, "I've got my husband here in his very best blue suit, but what I'd really appreciate is if you could have him in a black suit for the funeral. Here's a blank check. Use whatever you need. I just want him in a black suit." The mortician agrees and thanks the woman, and the first woman leaves. Now the second woman comes in and says, "I know I've brought my husband wearing a black suit, but I've always really loved him in blue. Is there any way you can have him in a blue suit for his funeral?" The mortician assures her that it's not a problem, and the second woman thanks her and leaves. A few days later, the mortician shows up at the first man's funeral, and his widow walks up and says, "Thank you so much for doing this. My husband looks wonderful in the black suit you found him." The mortician replies, "Of course, I was happy to do it. And here's your check back. No, I really appreciate it, and I want to pay you just to take whatever you need." "Oh, no, really, it didn't cost me anything. You see, right after you came in, a woman showed up with her husband in a black suit, and she wanted him wearing blue. So in the end, all I had to do was switch the heads." An Englishman, an Irishman, and a Scotsman are walking along the beach one day and come across a lantern, and a genie pops out of it. "I give you each one wish. That's 3 wishes in total," says the genie. The Irishman says, "I am a fisherman. My dad's a fisherman. His dad was a fisherman, and my son will be one too. I wish all the oceans to be full of fish for all eternity, and a fleet of fishing boats to catch them." So, with a blink of the genie's eye, the oceans were teeming with fish. The Englishman was amazed, so he said, "I wish for a great wall around England, protecting her, and all the foreigners were gone." With a blink of the genie's eye, there was a huge wall around England, and all foreigners disappeared. The Scot asks, "I'm very curious. Please tell me more about this wall." The genie explains, "Well, it's about 150 feet high, 50 feet thick, protecting England so that nothing can get in or out." The Scot says, "Double the size of it and fill it up with water." There was once a very successful farmer from Texas who started gaining interest in his ancestry. After doing some digging, he traced his lineage back to a small town in Ireland, and, lo and behold, they were a family of farmers. So he packed his bags and took a trip to Ireland to visit the small town to see if he could track down some of his kin. After landing in Dublin and driving an hour outside of the city, he stopped in a pub to grab a drink and start asking around about his family. The Texan sat down, ordered a pint, and started talking to the Irishman sitting at the bar. After explaining his story and the purpose of the trip, the Irishman responded, "You don't say. I've never heard of your family, but I'm a farmer as well. Tell me, what's it like farming in Texas?" "Gladly," the Texan said. "Farming in Texas has been quite lucrative for me. If you started out in the morning and drove west, you could drive all day before you reach the end of my property. And if you started the next day and drove east all day, you wouldn't reach the end of my property. Same thing north and south. You could drive either direction all day, and you wouldn't reach the end of my farmland." "Ah, I know what you mean," said the Irishman. "I've got a tractor like that as well." A newlywed farmer and his wife were visited by her mother, who immediately demanded an inspection of the place. While they were walking through the barn, the farmer's mule suddenly reared up and kicked the mother-in-law, unfortunately killing her instantly. At the funeral service, the farmer stood near the casket and greeted folks as they walked by. The pastor noticed that whenever a woman would whisper something to the farmer, he would nod his head yes and say something. Whenever a man walked by and whispered to the farmer, he would shake his head no and mumble a reply. Curious, the pastor later asked the farmer what that was all about. The farmer replied, "The women would say, 'What a terrible tragedy.' And I would nod my head and say, 'Yes, it was.' The men would ask, 'You want to sell that mule?' And I would shake my head and say, 'Can't, it's all booked up for a year.'" It was a long day for the 2 crews working to install telephone poles along a new highway. The foreman had divided them into 2 groups, each with a leader, and asked them to report back by sunset to see how much progress they'd made. As the sun dipped low, the 2 crews returned. The foreman approached the leader of the first group, eager to hear how they did. "How many poles did your crew install today?" he asked. 11, came the reply. "Not bad," the foreman said, giving him a pat on the back. "That's good work." Feeling pleased, the foreman turned to Santa, the leader of the second group. "How about you? How many poles did your crew manage to install?" Santa scratched his head and said, 2. The foreman's face twisted with frustration. 2? Just 2? The other group installed 11. What happened? Santa grinned and shrugged. "Well, you should have seen how much they left sticking out of the ground." An atheist was outraged over all the Christmas and Hanukkah celebrations, claiming it was unfair that atheists had no holiday of their own. Determined to fight this injustice, he filed a lawsuit. In court, his lawyer delivered a fiery speech. "Your Honor, Christians have Christmas and Easter, Jews have Passover and Hanukkah, but my client, along with all other atheists, has no official holiday. This is blatant discrimination." The judge listened patiently, then banged his gavel. "Case dismissed." The lawyer jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, how can you dismiss this? Atheists deserve a holiday, too." The judge leaned forward, smirking. "Your client already has a holiday. He's just too confused to celebrate it," the lawyer scoffed. "And what holiday would that be?" The judge calmly replied, "April 1st. Psalm 14. One says, 'The fool says in his heart, there is no God.' That makes April Fool's Day your client's official holiday. Now get out of my courtroom." It was a typical busy morning at Joe's garage, the air thick with the scent of oil and gasoline. Joe, a seasoned mechanic with grease-stained hands and a sharp wit, was deep in the process of removing a cylinder head from the engine of a Harley-Davidson. His focus was absolute, until he happened to glance up and spot a familiar face in the waiting area. Leaning casually against the counter was none other than Dr. Harrison, a renowned heart surgeon in town. The doctor was waiting for the service manager to check out his bike, looking every bit as refined as always in his crisp shirt and tailored slacks. Joe smirked, an idea forming in his mind. Wiping his hands on a rag, he called out across the garage, "Hey, Doc, mind if I ask you something?" Dr. Harrison, a bit surprised, strolled over to where Joe was working. "Of course," he said, curious. Joe gestured at the engine before him. "Look at this," he said. "I open it up, take out the valves, fix them, put them back in, and when I'm done, the engine runs as good as new. Now, you and we're basically doing the same job. But while I barely make enough to keep my toolbox full, you're out there raking in the big bucks. Tell me, Doc, how's that fair?" Dr. Harrison paused, a knowing smile spreading across his face. He leaned in close, patted Joe on the shoulder, and in a calm, measured voice whispered, "Try doing it with the engine running." An old man in Alabama named Steve is sitting on his front porch watching the sun rise. He sees the neighbor's kid walk by carrying something big under his arm. "Hey, boy, what you got there? Roll of chicken wire. What are you going to do with that? Gonna catch some chickens? You damn fool! You can't catch chickens with chicken wire!" The boy just laughs and keeps walking. That evening at sunset, the boy comes walking by, dragging behind him the chicken wire with about 30 chickens caught in it. The next morning, Steve is out watching the sun rise, and he sees the boy walk by carrying something in his hand. "Hey, boy, what you got there?" "Roll of duct tape. What are you gonna do with that?" "Gonna catch me some ducks." "You damn fool, you can't catch ducks with duct tape." The boy just laughs and keeps walking. That night around sunset, the boy walks by, trailing behind him the unrolled roll of duct tape with about 35 ducks caught in it. The next morning, Steve sees the boy walking by carrying what looks like a long reed with something fuzzy on the end. "Hey, boy, what you got there?" "It's a willow." "Wait up, I'll get my hat." Two 90-year-old women, Rose and Barb, had been friends all of their lives. When it was clear that Rose was dying, Barb visited her every day. One day, Barb said, "Rose, we both loved playing women's softball all our lives, and we played all through high school. Please do me one favor. When you get to heaven, somehow you must let me know if there's women's softball there." Rose looked up at Barb from her deathbed and said, "Barb, you've been my best friend for many years. If it's at all possible, I'll do this favor for you." Shortly after that, Rose passed on. At midnight, a few nights later, Barb was awakened from a sound sleep by a blinding flash of white light and a voice calling out to her, "Barb, Barb." "Who is it?" asked Barb, sitting up suddenly. "Who is it?" "Barb, it's me, Rose." "You're not Rose. Rose just died." "I'm telling you, it's me, Rose," insisted the voice. "Rose, where are you?" "In heaven," replied Rose. "I have some really good news and a little bad news." "Tell me the good news first," said Barb. "The good news," Rose said, "is that there's softball in heaven. Better yet, all of our old buddies who died before us are here too. Better than that, we're all young again. Better still, it's always springtime, and it never rains or snows. And best of all, we can play softball all we want, and we never get tired. That's fantastic, said Barb. It's beyond my wildest dreams, so what's the bad news? You're pitching Tuesday. It was a dark, quiet night, and a man hurriedly walked into his bedroom, mistaking the woman lying on the bed for his wife. Without a second thought, he climbed into bed and got closer than he should have. The room was pitch black, and the woman didn't say a word, just let out a soft hum. Rachel, is that you? Feeling bold, the man whispered back, Shh, it's just me. Your husband. But suddenly the woman broke the silence, her voice hesitant, yet clear. Excuse me, I'm not your wife. The man froze mid-motion, his confidence evaporating instantly. After an awkward pause, he muttered under his breath, Well, there's no turning back now. Halfway in, halfway gone. The king wanted to go fishing, and he asked the royal weather forecaster the forecast for the next few hours. The palace meteorologist assured him that there was no chance of rain. So the king and the queen went fishing. On the way, he met a man with a fishing pole riding on a donkey, and he asked the man if the fish were biting. The fisherman said, Your Majesty, you should return to the palace. In just a short time, I expect a huge rainstorm. The king replied, I hold the palace meteorologist in high regard. He is an educated and experienced professional. Besides, I pay him very high wages. He gave me a very different forecast. I trust him. So the king continued on his way. However, in a short time, a torrential rain fell from the sky. The king and queen were totally soaked. Furious, the king returned to the palace and gave the order to fire the meteorologist. Then he summoned the fisherman and offered him the prestigious position of royal forecaster. The fisherman said, Your Majesty, I do not know anything about forecasting. I obtain my information from my donkey. If I see my donkey's ears drooping, it means with certainty that it will rain. So the king hired the donkey, and so began the practice of hiring dumbasses to work in influential positions of government. The practice is unbroken to this day. This farmer has about 500 hens, but no rooster, and he wants chicks. So he goes down the road to the next farmer and asks if he has a rooster that he would sell. The other farmer says, Yep, I've got this great rooster named Kenny. He'll service every chicken you got, no problem. Well, Kenny the rooster costs $3,000, a lot of money, but the farmer decides he'd be worth it. So he buys Kenny. The farmer takes Kenny home and sets him down in the barnyard, but first he gave the rooster a pep talk. I want you to pace yourself. You got a lot of chickens to service here, and you cost me a lot of money. Consequently, I'll need you to do a good job. So take your time and have some fun, the farmer said with a chuckle. Kenny seems to understand, so the farmer points toward the hen house, and Kenny takes off like a shot. Wham! Kenny nails every hen in the hen house 3 or 4 times, and the farmer is really shocked. After that, the farmer hears a commotion in the duck pen, and sure enough, Kenny is in there. Later, the farmer sees Kenny after a flock of geese down by the lake. Once again, wham! He gets all the geese. By sunset, he sees Kenny out in the fields chasing quail and pheasants. The farmer is distraught and worried that his expensive rooster won't even last 24 hours. Sure enough, the farmer goes to bed and wakes up the next morning to find Kenny on his back out in the middle of the yard, mouth open, tongue hanging out, and both feet sticking straight up in the air. Buzzards are circling overhead. The farmer, saddened by the loss of such a colorful and expensive animal, shakes his head and says, Oh, Kenny, I told you to pace yourself. I tried to get you to slow down. Now look what you've done to yourself. Kenny opens one eye, nods toward the buzzards circling in the sky, and says, Shh, they're getting closer. The haircut, blessed are those that can give without remembering and take without forgetting. One day a florist went to a barber for a haircut. After the cut, he asked about his bill, and the barber replied, I cannot accept money from you. I'm doing community service this week. The florist was pleased and left the shop. When the barber went to open his shop the next morning, there was a thank you card and a dozen roses waiting for him at his door. Later, a cop comes in for a haircut, and when he tries to pay his bill, the barber again replied, "I cannot accept money from you. I'm doing community service this week." The cop was happy and left the shop. The next morning, when the barber went to open up, there was a thank you card and a dozen donuts waiting for him at his door. Then a member of parliament came in for a haircut, and when he went to pay his bill, the barber again replied, "I cannot accept money from you. I'm doing community service this week." The member of parliament was very happy and left the shop. The next morning, when the barber went to open up, there were a dozen members of parliament lined up waiting for a free haircut. And that, my friends, illustrates the fundamental difference between the citizens of our country and the politicians who run it. If you don't forward this, you have no sense of humor. A man is talking to his best friend about married life. "You know," he says, "I really trust my wife and I think she has always been faithful to me, but there's always that doubt." His friend says, "Yeah, I know what you mean." A couple of weeks later, the man has to go out of town on business. Before he goes, he gets together with his friend. "While I'm away, could you do me a favor? Could you watch my house and see if there is anything fishy going on? I mean, I trust my wife, but there's always that doubt." The friend agrees to help out, and the man leaves town. 2 weeks later, he comes back and meets his friend. "So, did anything happen?" "I have some bad news for you," says the friend. "The day after you left, I saw a strange car pull up in front of your house. The horn honked, and your wife ran out and got into the car, and they drove away. Later, after dark, the car came back. I saw your wife and a strange man get out. They went into the house, and I saw a light go on, so I ran over and looked in the window. Your wife was kissing the man, then he took off his shirt, then she took off her blouse. Then they turned off the light." "Then what happened?" says the man. "I don't know. It was too dark to see." "Damn, you see what I mean? There's always that doubt." A woman goes on a business trip overseas, leaving her husband behind to look after the house and kids. After a few days, she calls up to see how everything is. "Everything's fine," he says. "The kids are finally sleeping okay without you here, and my boss has given me an extra week off until you're back. Oh, I forgot to say, the cat's dead. She was hit by a car." "What?" says the wife. "Oh, are you serious? Why couldn't you have broken it to me more gently?" "How do you mean?" "You know how much I loved her. You could have lied to me and just built it up gradually. Like, you could have said she was stuck on the roof, and then tomorrow told me that the fire brigade was coming over to rescue her, and the day after that she'd fallen and broken her leg, and then on Friday you could tell me that she passed peacefully in her sleep. Don't just blurt out, 'The cat's dead.'" The man apologizes, and his wife hangs up, angry at him. After a few days, she calls back to apologize. "I'm sorry I snapped," she says. "These meetings have just been really stressful. How are you all doing?" "We're all good here," says the man. "Johnny got a certificate for swimming 100 meters, and Molly says she wants a pony for Christmas. Oh, I nearly forgot. Your mom is stuck on the roof." A professor travels to Africa to live with a primitive tribe and spends years with them, teaching them all about the wonders of science, mathematics, and formatting Reddit comments so they get the most upvotes. One day, the chief's wife gives birth to a white child. The word spreads, and the entire tribe is in shock. The chief pulls the professor aside and says, "Look, you're the only white man we've ever seen around here, and this woman just gave birth to a white child. It doesn't take a genius to figure out what happened." The professor replied, "No, chief, you're mistaken. What you have here is a natural occurrence, what we in the civilized world call an albino. Look at that field over there. All of the sheep are white except for one black one. Nature does this on occasion." The chief was silent for a moment, then said, "Tell you what. You don't say anything more about that sheep, and I won't say anything more about that white child." A boy named Carol had a particularly rough childhood because of his uncommon name. He always got a lot of teasing and abuse at school. Eventually, he overcame his hang-up and married his high school sweetheart. When their first child was born, he let his wife name her. She named the baby girl Love, inspired by the same spirit as Carol's unique name. Unfortunately, Love grew up and endured much of the same teasing that Carol did because of her strange name. She came home from school one day and screamed at her dad, asking why he gave her such a stupid name. Carol took the blame to protect his wife and apologized. In a fit of rage, Love shot him with her dart gun and ran away. Minutes later, Carol's wife came home and saw him lying on the ground. "What happened?" she asked, running to him. He waved her closer and whispered, "Shot through the heart, and you're to blame. Darling, you gave Love a bad name." An old Doberman was out for a stroll chasing rabbits when he suddenly realized he had no idea where he was. As he looked around to get his bearings, he spotted a young panther stalking him from the trees, clearly thinking about making him lunch. "Oh boy, and this doesn't look good," the old dog thought. But then he spotted a pile of bones nearby. Thinking quickly, he plopped down with his back to the panther and began gnawing on a bone loudly. Just as the panther was about to pounce, the Doberman shouted out, That last pancake was delicious. I wonder if there's another one around here." The panther froze mid-leap, eyes wide with fear, and slinked away into the woods. "Yikes, that was too close," the panther whispered. "That dog's a killer." But up in the tree, a squirrel had watched the whole scene. Eager to earn some protection, the squirrel dashed after the panther and spilled the whole story, telling him the Doberman had been bluffing. Furious at being tricked, the panther growled, "Hop on, squirrel, we're going back, and this time that dog's finished." Back in the clearing, the Doberman saw the panther charging toward him, with the squirrel riding shotgun. Thinking fast, he turned his back again and acted as if he hadn't noticed them. Just as they got within earshot, the old Doberman said aloud, "Where's that squirrel? I sent him off hours ago to bring me another panther." Two American girls were biking through the scenic hills of Scotland when they spotted an old man fast asleep under a tree. The view was so peaceful they stopped to snap a photo. As they got closer, they noticed the man was dressed head to toe in traditional Scottish attire, kilt, tam and all, snoring gently, completely unaware. One girl whispered, "Do you think it's true what they say about what Scotsmen wear under their kilts?" Her friend grinned. "Well, if we're ever going to find out, this might be our only chance." Curiosity won. They quietly lifted the edge of the kilt for a quick peek, then giggled, gently lowered it, and stood there wide-eyed. "We just totally invaded that man's privacy," one said. "Then maybe we should leave a small gift," the other replied. So one girl pulled a ribbon from her ponytail and gently tucked it beneath the kilt, a harmless little souvenir. Then they tiptoed away, jumped on their bikes, and rode off into the countryside. A while later, the old man stirred. Stretching and yawning, he noticed something felt a little different. He peeked under his kilt, paused, peeked again, and with a puzzled grin said, "Well now, I don't know where you've been today, lad, but whatever happened, it looks like you came in third." A local business was looking for office help and put up a sign saying, "Help wanted. Must be able to type, must be good with a computer, and must be bilingual. We are an equal opportunity employer." A short time afterwards, a golden retriever dog trotted up to the window, saw the sign, and went inside. He looked at the receptionist and wagged his tail, then walked over to the sign, looked at it, and whined. Getting the idea, the receptionist got the office manager. The office manager looked at the dog and was surprised, to say the least. However, the dog looked determined, so he let him into the office. Inside, the dog jumped up on the chair and stared at the manager. The manager said, "I can't hire you. The sign says you have to be able to type." The dog jumped down, went to the typewriter, and proceeded to type out a perfect letter. He took out the page and trotted over to the manager and gave it to him, then jumped back on the chair. The manager was stunned, but then told the dog, "The sign says you have to be good with a computer." The dog jumped down again and went to the computer. The dog proceeded to demonstrate his expertise with various programs and produced a sample spreadsheet and database and presented them to the manager. By this time, the manager was totally dumbfounded. He looked at the dog and said, "I realize that you are a very intelligent dog and have some interesting abilities. However, I still can't give you the job." The dog jumped down and went to a copy of the sign and put his paw on the part about being an equal opportunity employer. The manager said, "Yes, but the sign also says that you have to be bilingual." The dog looked at him and said, "Meow."